advising you to go in there. In terms of who we are at the Female Product Lead, if you're new to us, we're all about inclusive product leadership. We want to empower women and other underrepresented voices in product to lead, to grow, and to really connect with each other. We're all about having meaningful connections in the community and lifting each other up, really. We want to create a future where people, regardless of their backgrounds, their gender, whether or not they're neurodiverse, whether they're from a different ethnic group, we want to make sure that all of these people thrive, and we encourage inclusive teams in all of that, all what we do. So we have a great community at the Female Product Lead. You can scan the QR code at the top if you want to join us, if you haven't yet. We have loads of events that we do every single month. We have an active Slack community where everyone can get involved and get connected. We have a brilliant leadership team. Here's the complete list of us in the leadership team, and we have a brilliant team of volunteers behind the scenes that help out with the events and everything we do in the community, whether that's content, whether that's brand design, anything like that. So we really encourage people to get involved and grow and improve their skills. So if that sounds interesting to you, please make that step and join us. We'll be happy to have you and to help you grow. We have a couple of events just really quickly in the next month or so. At the end of this month, we have a summer party or cocktails event in person in King's Cross in London. So if you live nearby, please sign up for that. We have a QR code there for our Luma page where you can see all of our upcoming events and you can sign up for them and you can subscribe so you can get notified of any new events. And we also have sometime in August, we still need to fix a date for that. We have an event with Safi, who's a recruiter at Few and Far. We're going to be doing a series of events around starting a new role in product. So if you come from a different background than product, how do you start that journey? How do you get into product? So that's going to be an interesting session for any new and aspiring product managers. But that's it from me. That's all I wanted to say in terms of who we are and what we do here at the Female Product Lead. And I will hand over to Simonetta to introduce herself and get us started on this in this masterclass. So welcome, Simonetta. Over to you.
Thank you, Anna. And it's my pleasure to be here today, and not just because I get to talk about the finance topic, which is something that's dear to my heart, but also because this is a community that has inclusive leadership at heart, which is literally the domain name of my website and blog. I've been thinking about inclusive leadership and helping women have a successful career in product for a very long time. So if I'm not talking about numbers, this is like what I care about the most. So I'm exceptionally honored that I was invited to talk to all of you about the numbers, because I do think that being able to think about financials and making good business cases and arguing your ideas in the language of money, which is the language of decision makers in organizations, is one of the ways how you can have a successful career in product. And so with that, I will start sharing my screen. And we will jump in the actual content for today. So I will also put a link in the chat that you can use to join me on this mural board, but you don't have to. If you're just listening in, that's totally fine. If you would like to, you can join on the board and co-create with me. If some of you are, that's perfect. If others cannot because you're just listening in your lunch break, that's also perfectly fine. For me, it is important to create a space that is also joyful and kind. And you can, if you want to, just to test if the mural board is working for you, pull another quality into the room. I want us to have a really open dialogue in the session. I saw in the opening poll that some of you feel quite confident with the topic of financials and others are like at the start of this journey maybe. There are no bad questions you might be able to ask. Anything you want to know, anything I'm saying that doesn't immediately make sense, that you're like, oh, I don't get what that means, or maybe can you say it again, say it in other words, please just jump in and ask questions. That's totally fine. So I will also disable the cursors and summon you to follow me along in this board so we all look at the same stuff. And let's jump in. When we speak about financials, here are some of the main reports that people that look at the financial statements look at regularly. That is a balance sheet, that's a profit and loss statement, that might be a cash flow statement. Sometimes the P&L is called an income statement, and it's basically the same information, just organized a slightly different way. But what does it actually mean to look at these statements? Let's start with the balance sheet. On the balance sheet, which companies typically create at least once a year, maybe once a quarter, depending on what's going on in their context right now. On the one side, the company lists all the things that they own, all their assets. On the other side, the company lists everything that they owe to somebody. And then there's a delta. Hopefully you have more assets than you owe to other people. So there's something left over that is a positive thing for you to have. And it's called the equity. And there's also this position for the retained earnings. And what that means is it lists all previous year profits and or losses combined in one number. So when you compare a balance sheet over the course of time, you want to see this equity section or the retained earnings sections increase over time. So what people that look at balance sheets often take a look at is they might look at this from 2023, then 2024, 2025, and they want to see this portion of the balance sheet over time increase. That means the company is, generally speaking, financially healthy and doing well. If you are choosing a company to join and it might be publicly listed, you could look for their public earnings reports and take a look at these from the past years. And if you can see that this equity section is increasing over time, that's probably a company that is like financially somewhat stable and doing well. The other report that is even more important and that gets looked at least on a monthly basis in almost every organization, and some of them even more frequently, is the profit and loss statement. On the profit and loss statement, you have a similar concept. There's two sides to it. On one side, you list all the things the company is spending money on, all their expenses. And on the other side, you list everything the company is making money with. In other words, their income. And you see here, there's a third thing called the net operating result. In a company, again, that's healthy, the income side is larger than the expense side. And then there's a little delta here. That is the profit. The P&L, because it says profit and loss statement, could also work the other way around. If you have less income than you have expenses, you actually have a loss. And what that would mean is this net operating result would be a negative amount. And it would then also result in the retained earnings in the balance sheet being reduced by that amount in the following year. So why do people care about this P&L statement so much? Is because if you have a good net operating result, a good profit at the bottom of it, then that means you are in good shape to receive funding. For example, you have an ability to generate cash that funds your future investments and funds your teams, quite frankly. And the connection between what we're doing in product and what a CFO or executive team or a board is looking at is if we can somehow positively influence this net operating result here at the bottom of the P&L. Now, I know this is like quite theoretical, so I have prepared a sheet in Excel where we can actually play with these numbers a little bit. It's basically the same information we just looked at. And I want to just call out very briefly, I already mentioned a P&L and an income statement is basically the same thing. I took the same numbers here, my total income, my net sales revenue minus something that's my cost of goods sold. This is here my payroll and my mural subscriptions, licenses, whatever else thing, minus some administrative thing, advertising expenses, maybe my cost of acquisition for new clients, laptops, computers, servers, whatever, travel expenses, all these kinds of things. And you come to this other number that I think is important for us to understand. It's called EBITDA. EBITDA means earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. And it is a number that a lot of companies watch very closely. Now, it's almost the same as the net operating result up here, except that it doesn't take into account interest, depreciation, amortization, and tax stuff. And it's a number that is a good expression of the earnings potential of your company with just its core business. Why do CFOs and management teams and boards care so much about this number? Because oftentimes when you try to sell your company, they do an evaluation at something like 10 times the EBITDA. And so in this example, we're starting with a net operating result of 415,000. We have some interest, we have some depreciation. So we take this out, we arrive at this EBITDA that's higher, it's 525,000. And if we take, for example, a 10 times EBITDA as our assumed evaluation of the company, that means like 10 times this number is 5.25 million. Now let's play with this. Let's say we in product want to have an extra person in our team. This person costs us something like $100,000, including benefits and everything else. What we would expect to see is if I start putting in some money in this fictional P&L for this extra person, I would think my payroll expense goes up, my net operating result should go down, likewise my EBITDA and also my evaluation. And let's see by how much. If I put 100,000 in for this extra person that I want to have staffed in my team, obviously my payroll expense went up, my net operating result went down, my EBITDA went down, but what went down even more is this evaluation number. 10 times the EBITDA now took a $1 million hit. That explains why oftentimes CFOs and management teams are not so thrilled when we ask for a relatively minor spending expense, because if we're in a cycle where we're just about to be sold to a private equity firm, for example, the management team is incentivized to make this valuation of their company especially high. And so they would rather do the opposite of hiring a person, maybe fire a person to create a better net operating result, create a better EBITDA, and then also create a better evaluation. So when we make a business case and we want to have another person hired, we should argue the business case with one of the 4 strategies of how we can positively influence the net operating result. We could, for example, say, when we hire this person, we're going to make double the amount this person costs in extra revenue, because whatever thing is now possible that we want to build. Let's say we make 200,000 in extra revenue as a result of hiring this person. Now you see a blended result up here, right? We went from 415,000. We spent 100,000, so it went down to 315,000. We added 200,000 in extra revenue, so we're at 515,000. EBITDA moved accordingly, and the blended result in evaluation is now it went up by $1 million. That's why it's so important when we're asking for extra resources, which is something we often do in product, that we tie it to some sort of business value that compensates for the extra spend in a smart way. Let me pause here for a second and give you a chance to ask questions if you have any. You can just unmute yourself and jump right in. Is this clear so far? If not, please ask. I see some thumbs up, so seems to make sense. But if somebody is puzzled, please jump in.
I had a question. So when you're thinking about how much that extra person is going to bring in, like that's really tricky, right? Because you add one and it doesn't necessarily scale either linearly or exponentially. So I don't know if you're going to cover it later, but some tips on how to understand what adding one extra person is actually going to bring in terms of income would be really beneficial. Like if there's a formula to calculate that or something, that'd be great.
Yeah. One way to think of this is like the initiatives that you're going to start, right? And I think usually tying it to one person is a little bit harder, but if you think at scale in larger organizations and you want an entire team staffed around some topic, then this topic should aim at a business outcome, right? In some way. It should aim at increasing revenue. It should aim at protecting revenue or saving cost or avoiding future cost in some way, and you would calculate a business case around this. All of this is based in assumptions, obviously. But honestly, the people that are more often seen as positive influences on the P&L, as revenue drivers, right, are the people in sales or marketing. And when you look at their forecasting, it is a pipeline forecast, right? It is like their sales funnel forecast. It's also based in assumptions. Sometimes in product, we seem to think that our assumptions have to be 100% accurate, 100% perfect, right? There's no such thing. It's taking bets. And that's also a language that management understands, right? Anything in a strategy is taking a bet, right? So as long as you can argue reasonable assumptions around your business case, you should be fine. But obviously, you could be wrong, right? You could be making assumptions that don't turn out to be true, or you are underestimating the positive impact you're going to have, right? Assumptions are just like that, and being explicit and clear in what your assumptions are and how you calculated them, and maybe then also showing a best case, worst case, and reasonable case scenario to have people play with your assumptions is a good way to get your business case accepted and or challenged. Sometimes when it's getting challenged, you're learning something important, right? Any other questions at this point? Okay, let's move on to the next section then. I put together some of the more frequent metrics that we use in product that somehow express a relationship to the financial numbers, right? Oftentimes we speak about something like customer acquisition cost, which is the money we spend to get a new user in a subscription business, for example. We might be looking at monthly recurring revenue, MRR, or annual recurring revenue, ARR, something you hear Lovable boast about publicly right now, how in very brief amount of time they created, I think right now the number is like 90 million annual recurring revenue. People might track a customer lifetime value or a total contract value. They might track a number of paying users gained or lost, a churn rate of paying users. They might calculate a return on investment. They might calculate a cash burn rate. What I want to point out here is in your business, you may see any of these and or additional financial metrics. No two companies are exactly the same. And what you need to find out when you want to start having a successful business case and having the right language around your business case, you need to understand what is the language and the metric that your organization tracks and how can you shape it. So if you don't know, a great place to start is to go to somebody in your organization as high up in their finance team as you can reasonably get your hands on, right? Let's say you're a scale up, you can absolutely go to your CFO. Organization till 250 people, you still have access to this person. Organization like Amazon, you're probably not going to be able to go all the way up to your CFO unless you're very lucky. But then take a look at your business unit. For example, there's somebody in charge of the financial numbers of your business unit. Talk to this person and ask them, can you explain our numbers to me? What financial metrics are we watching? What's more important right now, top line revenue or bottom line profit? What this means is like in the logic of, let's go back to this Excel sheet, it's a little bit easier to see. top line revenue is like, if you sort the P&L this way as an income statement, this is the number, top line revenue. Bottom line profit is referring to the EBITDA. Or if you're looking at this, top line revenue is this together, and bottom line profit is this number. Depending on where your company is at in their journey, sometimes, let's say you just got a ton of funding, you might only look at growth and you don't look at what that growth costs you at the moment, because you have a heavy investment just in a growth story, and then the bottom line profit and your expenses are not so important as long as growth is there. Let's say you are shortly before you want to sell yourself to a private equity firm or to the next investor, then they're going to only really care about net operating result or profit at the bottom, or EBITDA. And that's the one thing that they optimize for. Let's say you are in a startup. Maybe you are so tight in cash that you're watching your run rate, and a small investment in an extra server or an extra person is just not something that your month-to-month cash flow calculations can stem. And so somebody might be paying very close attention to a cash flow balance, and anything you can do that immediately adds cash to the company's bottom line will be the one thing that they care about and nothing else. Because it's this different, you need to really go and look and talk to your finance team and understand which one of these numbers do they actually care about and why. And then depending on what that answer is, you structure your business case pitches according to what they care about. Another really powerful question that's worked in my favor many times is going into a new organization and ask, what business case and extra revenue or cost savings would move the needle for us? Because let's look back at this example. In a company that fictionally makes 3 million in total income, something like 500,000 is a meaningful percentage-wise increase in revenue. For Amazon, 500,000 is a 0.000 something add in revenue or cost savings. So really not that sexy. It's important to understand, like, what is the size of all of this? If you don't know, that's why I'm telling you, go speak to them and ask, can you explain our numbers to me? And ask this question, what size business case is meaningful here? Because then you can start thinking about the kind of ideas that really in a meaningful way move the needle in your context. Let's try to relate now this stuff into the logic of a P&L. And I'm just gonna open this up so we can see these things all at the same time and re-summon you here. If you had to sort a customer acquisition cost somewhere in the logic of a P&L, does CAC belong to expenses, income, or profit? Where would you put it? Like, one of you can just pull the sticky over. Whoever did this, like, can you narrate why you put it here? I agree, it belongs into the expenses.
I put that there.
and why?
It usually translates into marketing budget costs. So things like PPC spend, website, like all of those bits, cost of customer acquisition. So it's not strictly, I mean, it can be payroll because it can be your marketing team costs as well. Mm-hmm. It's not income, it's an outgoing expense. Right.
What about the next two ones, monthly recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue? And maybe someone else wants to put one of these stickies. If not, Caroline, you can go again, but where does this belong? Income, I would agree again. Who put this here and why?
I put those into income. I suppose the rationale behind it is it's like money that's generated that's going into the business as opposed to like something that you're outwardly spending. It's like cash in the bank versus cash leaving your bank to try and realize like revenue. That's where my head was at.
Yeah, and you speak about two functions this has. It's correct, it's income. And also every time you have income where people actually pay you, it will positively influence your cash position or your bank account balance as well at the same time. So it also, we don't have the balance sheet here right now, but it would also show up in the asset section in your bank account balance. So you're totally right in placing it there. Someone jumped ahead and put the ROI into income. Who did that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I jumped ahead.
No, that's totally fine. Tell me
Yeah.
why you put it there.
So for me, I felt like obviously, anything that we do, any kind of, major push that we're doing, we want to have some kind of ROI on that. So whatever we are investing in, be it our people, our processes, our products, whatever, there should be some kind of return on that, which is income, essentially.
Yes, and you already also said like whatever we're putting in, so it's also expenses, right? This is not so clear. It's actually kind of sitting in the middle, right? Because
True.
an ROI has both aspects to it, right? You made an investment and then you want to see a return on this investment. But this ROI could literally like sit entirely on this side of the P&L. I'll give you an example. You might do something that is saving cost. So if you make this entire bucket up here with the expenses smaller, you also increase your profit, right? So you have a return on investment in some sort of cost saving initiative that doesn't touch income at all, but still makes the profit larger. The ROI could also be something where you make an investment in a new project that actually increases revenue, right? And then it lives on both the expense side as well as the income side, as well as then creates a profit, right? So it could be living in any of these scenarios. It could, quite frankly, also a negative ROI could live on the other side, right? Like you put something in, the benefit did not materialize. It actually resulted in a loss. And then an ROI could look negative. So an ROI number is an expression of the relationship between whatever investment you made and the result or business outcome it created. And it could be living anywhere in this. So it's not so clear cut anymore. And let's take a look at customer lifetime value and see where you would place this. Anyone want to take a bet? Yeah, that's exactly where I would put it as well. Who did it and why?
It was me again. So basically, I put this one between the two because I think if you have like, let's say, recurring customers who are positively influencing your revenue line, then you can kind of look at it through the revenue lens. However, in order to realize that value from the customer, you might actually need to spend to kind of sustain them. So I kind of think it works both ways. You might need to spend to kind of keep them with you, which has a cost, even if you'll ultimately get revenue at the end of it.
Right. So you're completely right. You mentioned one of the ways in which a customer could create cost, right? So you might have to spend to keep them. The more common one even is you have to spend to even gain them. So there's a customer acquisition cost in terms of like SEO spend or affiliate spend or sign up bonus or whatever. And then over the lifetime of this customer, they are starting to create income and create revenue. Oftentimes in the initial period, like month one, you spend more on the customer than you're making with them. And then in subsequent months, maybe you have no spend anymore and it's just sitting on the income side. So depending on how your acquisition funnel works and the timing of a P&L, this might mean why at the end of the year in November, December, if you want to have a healthy profit at the end of the year, you scale back marketing expenses and you scale them back up in Q1 of the next year, where you hope that for the remainder of the year, you're going to keep making more revenue with this customer again. So there's like ways to shift cost between periods that may or may not matter in your context as well. This is why I think it's so important to understand what matters in your organization's financial picture at any point in time. And the only way you can find out where your company is at with this, like if they're just on a growth strategy, they don't care. They will want to spend money on acquiring users anytime in the year. If they are heavily optimizing this year's profit for whatever reason, they might want to delay spending into the new year until they do something else again. But what I want you to take away from this is there are some metrics that we're tracking in product, like customer lifetime value, or maybe even something like an ROI, that is not so clear cut, only one of the two things. And that's how most of our business cases also work. We usually have something that we put in most of the time, the expense of our own team, in order to make something happen, either more revenue or revenue protection or cost savings or cost avoidance. But every time we work with a development team, we actually have a heavy spend in the payroll bucket in order to make an effect come true. And if you want to think about a successful business case, I would think about 3 to 5 times the cost of my team as my bare bones minimum expectation of return on investment, because sometimes our ideas don't work out, right? Despite our best efforts to do a good job in discovery, we may have an idea that actually doesn't pan out. And so not everything that we're doing will actually work. And if we just aim to make the money back that our team costs and something doesn't work, then the thing that doesn't work, the team cost, is a sunk expense. Versus if we create enough ideas at our ambition levels, it's at least 3 to 5 to maybe even 10 times what our team's cost is, then we should be on the safe side that if anyone asks us about the value of our own team, we can say with the expense of the payroll of this team, we created this much extra income, this much cost savings, or a blended effect of all of these. Let's take a quick look at these 4 main strategies to create input for a business case. And they come from this logic up here. If you want to increase profit, the yellow section here, right? You can make this larger if expenses stay the same and income grows, right? Because both sides of the P&L will always have to balance, always stay the same. So if you make this section a larger portion, the income side, while you keep expenses stable, then profit grows. That's one strategy to have a good business case. Imagine you are doing something to reduce churn. That means you're protecting the income side of your P&L so it doesn't shrink, because if this shrinks, you're also going to shrink your profit, right? So you're doing something that decreases churn, protects future revenue. That could be a business case idea. The other thing how you can make this bigger is you decrease expenses, right? Anything you do that cuts the cost structure will lead to more profit. And anything you do to keep future expenses stable. So think about anything investing into a scaling exercise, so that with the existing infrastructure, hardware, team size, whatever, you can keep creating more income, therefore then again, a higher profit. Those are the 4 main strategies for creating input for a business case. And I'd love for you to take a moment and maybe write down some additional ideas for each of these strategies that could be good ideas for you to focus on in your respective context. So we already said it's like something like, for example, increase subscription base. More people subscribing, that clearly increases revenue, right? Protecting revenue, we said, decrease churn. Saving costs could be, I don't know, like efficiencies in server setup. And avoiding costs could be something like investing in scaling. What else in terms of ideas do you have? You can just grab a sticky or speak into the room and I'll capture it for you. Yeah, launch a new product could increase revenue. Exactly, good one. Avoiding cost, regulatory compliance, absolutely. Yeah, anything that makes sure you don't have to pay a fine in the future would avoid cost. Very good. Yeah, renewals, re-win B2B business at end of contract term, absolutely. Protecting revenue. Increasing revenue expand into a new geo segment, absolutely. Yeah, that works. Comply with regulation, absolutely. Avoid cost, right? Maybe also like build ethical AI. Yeah, saving cost, setting up enabling teams in order to reduce duplication. You could almost say that's more like a avoid cost strategy, not a save cost strategy, because setting up this team actually does cost some money, right? But it could live here or there or in the middle somewhere. Upselling existing customers into more products, absolutely, that would create revenue. Saving cost, layoffs, yes. And we sadly see this strategy being deployed quite heavily in many contexts. Anything automation, absolutely. That's like that's the driving force behind why management teams right now are so excited about the potential of AI. Because if you can create efficiencies by automation, then you can save cost. Optimizing the sales cycle duration, yes, absolutely. That could also, I'm just going to duplicate this one because that could also be an increase in revenue strategy. Yeah, lower the cost of production, for example, insurances, softwares, whatever. Maybe you have very high licensing fees for something that you could make cheaper or more efficient. Yeah, building communities for user retention could be a protect revenue play. Awesome. There's lots and lots and lots of good ideas in here. I hope for those of you who might not have put a sticky, this gives you an idea of the kinds of things that you could be doing in order to create a valuable business case. Yeah, proactive customer support would avoid costs down the road, potentially, yeah. Or I'm going to duplicate this one as well. It might be a protect revenue strategy at the same time, right? It could have multiple effects. And I love that you bring some ideas in, like optimizing the sales cycle duration, for example, that have multiple effects at the same time. Because that is a very usual thing in calculating your business case, that there is more than one thing that your initiative is driving. So always ask yourself when you're making a business case, which of these dimensions is this initiative, is this idea really driving? And if there's more than one of them, then start calculating more than one of these things. You want to express this in money terms. So it's not enough to say we're working on automation. You want to make a statement about how much cost this is going to save. So for automation, for example, if you had found something that would save 20% of the time of your entire customer care staff all the time, and you have 500 people working in customer care, and you take an average pay and apply this times 20% per annum, that would be the gain to be had of this cost savings initiative. And you want to actually make sure that this final amount is, again, like in the neighborhood of 3 to 5 times larger than the invest you make in building this. So let's say it costs you one sprint in a typical European or US based company costs you between like 30 to 50K. So you can start thinking about like a sprint should result in something like 250K in benefit in any one of these strategies or a blend of them. And if you find yourself putting stuff together in sprints or in months periods that isn't like in this neighborhood of value creation, first of all, realize that this is what's happening, because then it's very hard for you to argue the value of your own team, and start thinking about ways in which you can increase the value that your teams are creating. I absolutely love all the stuff that you're creating here. It absolutely shows that there's lots of experience in this room with thinking about how to make a case for the things that you would like to build. Let's go one step deeper into revenue business cases. I'm just giving you an example here of a somewhat generic formula that in a version of this probably applies in your context as well. I'm just going to summon you here again, so we all look at the same thing. The generic formula is some number of clients from some ideal customer profile does something which results in certain revenue per this event activity equaling the total revenue. To give 2 examples, 100 streaming users subscribing at $29 per month is $2,900 per month in streaming revenue from these 100 users. DeepSeek model users use certain number of API tokens sold times token price is the usage revenue of this business model. Your own business model will follow some sort of logic like this. You want to find out what that is. And again, if you don't know, and if this is hard for you to wrap your head around, like go speak to the people in your finance team, have them explain your revenue formula in the way they see it to you. You should really know this as product leaders, but if you don't, they can be your friend in understanding. And then it's interesting to start brainstorming on how can you optimize this revenue model. What are the main drivers for it? So in this example, one of the streaming service, for example, strategies to increase revenue here would be obviously increasing the number of streaming users. Could also be doing something with the price. It could also be they subscribe to some sort of a premium bundle, ad-free, whatever, or any other thing that influences these factors so that you can optimize and start increasing the revenue side of your organization. Now, I want to tie this back one more time to this number here. On your P&L, there will be some sort of total number, and there might be multiple revenue streams that make up this total number, especially if your company has more than one product. It matters to understand which of these revenue lines you are in. If you are in this fictional example responsible for subscription revenue, you are only like 1/6 of the total revenue of this company. 50% increase on that is still not as much as 20% increase on the service revenue line. So it matters as you're also thinking about like, where do I position myself in my own organization? The biggest opportunity for impact you will always have if you're responsible for a team that contributes to the main revenue generating line in your business. It's much harder to justify the value you bring to the overall organization when you're in the behind the scenes platform team than if you are driving the main revenue driver of your organization. And it's not just that it's easier to then impact this number in a meaningful way if you're coming from this base. It's also that generally you have more attention and more budget and more possibilities to create stuff than if you're contributing somewhere in the background to enabling teams. But if you are, then it's important to think about ways how your platform team might positively influence the most meaningful revenue generating opportunity in your organization and or the most meaningful new strategy play that your organization wants to achieve, right? So for example, the idea is to increase revenue by going into a new market, and your platform team builds the infrastructure so you can even go into that new market. Tying it into that strategic initiative is also a good way to argue your business case. I'm going to put another stop here and see if someone wants to ask a question. If now, I want to just quickly show this to you. I'm teaching this content and then how to go deeper into actually calculating a business case with templates and everything in a course. It runs monthly. I'm going to take a break in the summer. So the July cohort's running, and then September and October are going to be the next dates. This will be like 3 times 60 minutes. The first hour is very similar to the content we looked at today, but then in the second and third part, we're going to go into really like, how do I calculate a business case, and also budgeting and forecasting. What does it mean? OPEX and CAPEX and all these things. How can I work with this? And then it ends with a personalized coaching hour for each of the participants to really go into your business cases and get help understanding how to calculate any one of these. So if this is interesting for you, it costs $399. I'm going to offer you a discount. There's also a sliding scale payment option. If you cannot afford anything right now because you're unemployed, then we can talk. I hope this enables lots of women to better argue the numbers, have better language for money in their organizations, and then also as a result have more meaningful impact in your organizations towards your strategic success and also your career. So I think we have time for a few more questions at the end, and I'm going to just stop sharing so I can see you better.
Yeah. There's a couple of questions in the notes section, so I'll just read them out and then we can go through them one by one. So the first one is, could you please talk about cost and profit centers and how companies decide where tech sits for them?
Yeah. Oftentimes tech is seen as a cost center because, like, and I'm going to just share the screen again because I think it's easier to illustrate this on one of the examples. So typically we're seen as contributing here, right? If we create absolutely no value with the things that we do, we definitely cost our team's payroll, right? So in terms of how a CFO looks at our contributions in tech, we will definitely show up here as payroll expense, right? Like clockwork, we do nothing, we cost money. The thing that you want to achieve is to be seen as a driver of revenue or as a driver of cost savings or any other way that positively influences the net operating result, because then you are seen as a value driver. But without you actually narrating this tale and speaking on the amount of money you're creating in terms of extra profit, no one will tell the tale for you. And rest assured, marketing and sales are not shy in telling their stories of how they're creating revenue. So if that's the dynamic in your organization, you can start taking charge of telling better money stories by calculating business cases and starting to change the language in your organization about your team's contributions. Because if you are only seen as a cost center, then it's very hard for people to understand the value that your teams are driving.
Right. Let me go back to the questions. Well, there's one more question. What about marketplaces or B2B2C models? Not all products will directly drive or even link to revenue, but are still important for network effects and market share of the customer. How do those teams prove their value?
Again, you would want to make an indirect argument, right? Like anything you do should ultimately influence income, cost savings, income protection, cost avoidance, any one of these 4 strategies. So it's tying the value you create into the teams that consume your platforms, back office tools, APIs, whatever it is, and making a direct connection in how this serves the business. That's why I've been saying it is much better strategically. It's a much more direct argument if you are responsibly directly for this, right? If you are finding yourself in a platform team and you are very ambitious, I would look to eventually make a shift into one of the really revenue driving teams if you can, because that will always be the much easier place for you to argue the value of your team. I have a lot of respect and empathy for people that do the behind the scenes platform work. It's much harder to show the direct impact you have, but oftentimes you can make an argument that without your team's contribution, none of the income would exist, or expense would be exponentially higher. So along these lines, you can also make an argument.
Great, that makes sense. Does anyone have any more questions? I've gone through the ones in the notes. If you want to unmute yourself or if you want to pop it in the chat, now is the time.
Somebody asked for where they can sign up for the course. I put the link in the chat. And also,
Yeah, I have pinned that.
If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to. You can just reach out and also ask follow-up questions there or in Slack in the female product lead community. Either way of these ways to approach me is working.
If there aren't any more questions, and while people are typing as well, I will just start. We've got a very quick poll right at the end, just to understand what everyone's taken away from the session. It would be great if you could fill that out. It's literally even a word is enough. So if you want to do that, please do that now. Would be useful for us as a quick feedback check. And just before we leave, also you should get a feedback form through Luma after the event as well. If there's any feedback you want to give us, we'd very much appreciate that, so we can learn and make future events even better. But yeah, thank you very much for attending today. I hope everyone is feeling a bit more confident about their financial knowledge. And yeah, we hope to see you at one of our future events. Please join the community if you haven't yet, so we can see you on Slack as well. But yeah, hopefully it was a useful session for everybody and you've taken something away from it. That's the main thing.
And I'm happy to hang back for another few minutes if someone wants to still ask a question here. But I want to respect everyone's time who needs to leave. And
yeah, absolutely. Some really good comments coming in on the poll. Making friends with people in finance. Very important.
Absolutely, go and make friends with them. They can be your best support and help in this. They'll also help you actually work on your business case template, right? Like get started with something, but then show it to them and say, hey, what am I missing? Can you help me make this better? Does what I'm calculating here make sense to you? Do you see something that I should be considering that I'm not? They can really make your business case templates so much more solid before you even show them to some other stakeholder with lots of power and influence.
Yeah, so true.
And actually, I've had a course participant tell me a really fun story. She did this. She went to her CFO. She asked these questions. She started making calculations. He was so impressed that he ended up paying for the course for her. And he started taking her way more serious. And her CPO said to her, look, you are so far ahead of the curve of all the other PMs in our team because no one else has looked at these numbers the way you are. So
that's amazing.
It really works. Like, talk to people and kind of treat this as a discovery internal project on like the interests of your management teams.
Yeah,
agenda.
I think
right?
honestly, the earlier you can get stuck into this type of thing, the better. I wish I had more interest in this, or at least someone had directed me into this direction much earlier in my career. But yeah, I think definitely one to take away and one to dig into, because it will definitely get you far.
Yeah. It's funny because I started my career in finance. Maybe I should have told this at the beginning, right? I was like talking or doing financial numbers hands-on as a director of finance, as a controller, preparing these numbers for board meetings, talking to management about numbers all the time. And I never understood how much of an advantage I had compared to the rest of the product people in my organizations just because I spoke money fluently. I remember one of my managers coming to me once being completely puzzled how I got a team funded for something. And I was like, well, I just went and I made a business case and I showed how this would pay for itself and I got the budget. And he was flabbergasted. It really works to argue your ideas in the language that makes sense to management and the board. And it's not that hard. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we are pretty much at time. We're just 2 minutes over, in fact. So yeah, again, thank you everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate you joining us on a lunchtime event. And yeah, we hope to see you in the future, either in the community or on a future event. Have a great rest of your week, and thank you, Simonetta, so much for running this session for our community. We really appreciate it, and I think it's been super useful for everybody.
Thank you. It's been fun to be here.